Dust swirled across the packed Earth Street of Coldwater Junction like a restless spirit, ghosting between warped storefronts and creaking signs, until it gathered around the ramshackle auction platform that had been dragged into the town's Lone Square. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, bleaching color from every surface, yet the platform itself, scaffolded with weather, bleached timber, and braced by iron nails, rescued from abandoned mine shafts, seemed to draw every wandering eye. At its center stood a crude set of brass scales, their pans polished to an almost ceremonial shine, and beside them waited a small pyramid of burlap flour sacks, each stenciled with a faded mill emblem. Rowena Maddox kept her chin high as the crowd shifted, feeling the weight of every stare, every murmur that curled like stale smoke above their heads. Sweat slicked the back of her neck beneath a coil of dark auburn hair, but she refused to raise a hand to wipe it away. She would give them nothing, no gesture of weakness, no sign that their chatter reached the marrow of her bones. Her wrists had been freed before she was led onto the platform. Shackles, the merchant had assured her, put folk off their feed. Instead, he'd looped a glossy ribbon around each slender wrist, as though she were a prize calf rather than a breathing woman whose heartbeat thundered loud enough to crack ribs. The merchant, a barrel-chested man named Abel Zeke Todd, stepped forward and lifted a palm for quiet. Sunlight glinted against the sheen of pomade in his hair, and his watch chain glimmered with each theatrical puff of his chest. "Ladies and gentlemen," he drawled, voice oiled by years of wheeling fortunes from hardship, "what you see here is a fine, sturdy specimen. Healthy, strong, educated enough to keep accounts when she's told, but not so educated she talk back." He shot Rowena a sideways grin meant to be reassuring. It made her stomach lurch. "We shall sell her, fair and square, by her weight in finest Kansas ground flour. The mill's owner himself vouched each sack, and I added a pinch of my own. Guarantee." A ripple of greedy laughter slipped through the spectators. Cattle barons washed by dust, itinerant peddlers, 2 well-heeled storekeepers, and a handful of drifters who smelled the same rotten opportunity. Todd exhaled with every exclamation. Rowena scanned them. Faces blurred at first, gleaming teeth, cracked lips, a cluster of cigar stubs balanced on lower jaws. But when her gaze snagged on a pair of unfamiliar eyes, steady, glacial gray, belonging to a tall stranger in a sun-bleached duster time slowed like cooled syrup, he leaned against the hitching rail outside Harbin's Tavern, half in shadow. Brim of a black Stetson pulled low. A bright gold pocket watch winked against his chest, catching the light each time he exhaled. Unlike the others, he didn't smirk or feign a yawn. He simply watched, arms folded, as though measuring something. Only he could see. Rowena felt a flicker: curiosity, defiance, hope. She couldn't tell. She faced front again when Todd waved for an assistant. "Elijah, bring the scale. Folks paid to witness honest weight, so let's give him a show." Elijah, barely 16, positioned Rowena gently on the left pan, creaking under the unexpected solemnity. She had half-expected jeers, maybe rotten fruit, but the hush that fell tasted heavier than all of that. Fabric rustled as her plain cotton dress settled. The metal groaned at the first reading, 125 pounds and change. Todd barked numbers, then began stacking 20-pound flour sacks on the opposite pan. Onlookers craned, counting beneath their breath. Each thud of burlap against metal reverberated beneath Rowena's ribs. With every sack, her fate sank further from her control. Memories fluttered, Mama watering hardscrabble garden rows, Papa limping after an accident in the copper mine, little sister June humming lullabies to scrap doll babies. All gone now, Papa from pulmonary dust, Mama from fever, June stolen. By the same creditors who had traded Rowena's future for 3 months' rent. Rowena tightened her core, willed her breathing slow. She would not collapse under their gawking. Finally the scales balanced, Board level. 11 sacks and a half. Bag tied off like a loaf. Todd announced the tally, wiping a theatrical bead of sweat from his brow. Bidding starts at weight, he called. 11 and a half sacks. Who'll trade grain for flesh this fine afternoon? A storekeeper named Balcom raised 2 fingers. His wife sniffed disapprovingly, but held her tongue. She wanted a housemaid as much as he wanted a trophy. A lean cattleman in a frayed waistcoat offered 12 sacks plus a jug of Applejack. The peddlers bid in broken increments, 10 sacks and a shovel. 12 and 2 bolts of muslin. Todd prodded them higher. Rowena stared at a cracked board beneath her bare toes, heart banging. 15 sacks. Balcom crowed, emboldened by competition. And a side of salted beef from my cellar. Cheers, then booze. The crowd relished the theater of human sale. Todd clapped like a minister at revival. He jerked his chin toward the silent stranger near the tavern. What say you, sir? Your pockets look heavy. The stranger pushed off the rail. Boots whispered across chalky soil, the hush feeling almost reverent. He stopped 2 paces from the stage and removed his hat, revealing tousled hair the color of prairie straw. His voice, when it came, rolled deep and measured. I bid 1 saddlebag of San Francisco Gold Eagles, he said, producing a leather pouch and letting its weight thunk across the plank deck. A collective gasp, the kind townsfolk recounted for winters to come, erupted. Even Todd's jaw sagged before snapping shut around pleasure. Gold, you say? At that weight, he weighed the pouch, coins chinking. Why, that's near 4 times her flour value. 5, the stranger corrected coolly, with gratuity. Murmurs rose, more than most men earned in 2 seasons. Rowena's throat tightened. Had she traded one kind of imprisonment for another? She met the stranger's gaze, seeking cruelty, lust, or that sick triumph she'd seen in Todd's eyes. Instead, she found something disconcertingly calm and almost scholarly. Assessment. No other takers? Todd crowed. Going once, twice sold. He slapped the air, triumphant. The spectators broke into applause tinted with envy. The stranger climbed the steps, and Rowena's breath caught. Up close he smelled of clean leather and high mountain pine, not whiskey or cigar smoke. He offered a hand. Miss Maddox, I presume. She flinched. How did he know her name? Todd must have bragged earlier or scribbled it on a ledger for gawkers, yet it rattled. She placed her hand in his, noting the warmth. The calluses softened by saddle oil, but it was the steadiness that unnerved her most. Rowena, she whispered. Back at Granger, he replied. Let's leave this circus. Todd shoved a folded parchment at him, proof of purchase, and pocketed the gold, eyes glittering like a magpie. Pleasure doing business. Take good care. She's hardy. Granger guided Rowena down the steps. Sunlight stabbed her retinas in sudden freedom. The crowd parted reluctantly, some tipping hats, others licking their lips at lost opportunity. Once clear, Rowena tugged her hand free. Why? She demanded, low enough only he could hear. Why pay gold for a woman you've never seen? He nodded toward the hitching post where a chestnut gelding flicked its tail. Because flour spoils and coin spends, but a free soul, he slid her a sidelong glance, is worth more than either. Rowena's stomach flipped. Pretty words. Cost nothing. She kept pace beside him anyway, mindful that running would brand her ingrate and draw gunfire from Todd's enforcers. Granger swung into his saddle then, extended an arm to lift her up. Rowena hesitated, scanning dusty rooftops for a hidden deputy who might claim breach of contract. Seeing none, she accepted. The gelding snorted but settled, used to double weight. Granger wheeled them north along the wagon ruts leading out of town. Their departure went largely unnoticed. The rabble had migrated toward Cousin's Cantina, where Todd would doubtless buy an ill-fated round to celebrate Dot beyond the last clapboard shack, Coldwater Junction shrank to a blur of smoke and horse dung. Rolling grassland opened, speckled by sage, shimmering under heat mirage. For a full minute, Rowena listened only to hoofbeats and distant cicadas. Wind tugged stray strands of hair across her cheek. Then she spoke. "You own a ranch?" "2 valleys over," he answered, adjusting. Reins one-handed. "Cedar Hollow, cattle mostly, bit of wheat. So I am to be cook?" "Maid, you are to be free." He said it like reciting rainfall totals. "Free," she echoed bitterly. "The last man who promised freedom handed me to Todd in exchange. For a gambling debt. My affairs aren't his." Granger scanned the horizon as though expecting wolves. "But I understand your doubt. You'll have proof soon enough." They rode on. Rowena catalogued details. The fine stitching on his gloves, the faint scab across his jaw as if from recent fistfight, the faint tremor that traveled his shoulders each time he inhaled sign of old injury or suppressed tension. If he was a rescuer, he was reluctant, carrying grief inside each breath. "Why gold?" she asked finally. "Could have bid flower like the rest." "A gesture," he replied. "Gold's the only thing men like Todd respect." "I wanted the sale done before greed drowned common sense." Rowena tried to imagine 5 saddle pounds of eagles and failed. "What stops Todd from sending gunmen after us?" He tapped a rifle boot, sheath Rowena hadn't noticed. "They won't ride for a day at least. Too busy drinking and counting." Wind shifted, bringing cooler air scented with pine. Ahead, jagged peaks cut silhouettes against cobalt sky. Granger slowed the gelding to spare its lungs on the incline. Rowena risked peering back Coldwater, a smear of orange roofs. "You said my name," she mused. "How? Stage driver told me last night," he admitted. "Word travels fast when folks traffic people." His shoulders twitched again. "I spent the morning asking around, gave Todd the impression I was a simple cattle buyer so he wouldn't raise the bid." They crested a rise and the world opened into a shallow basin through which a meandering river stitched silver ribbons. In that instant, Rowena felt something crack the cage around her chest she'd clamped for survival. Breath rushed in so abruptly, it stung. At dusk, they stopped beside a granite outcrop streaked with quartz. Granger lifted her down, then busied himself watering the gelding at a rivulet. Rowena rubbed circulation into her thighs while scanning the horizon. Even here, emptiness could hide danger. "How far to Cedar Hollow?" "Another 10 miles. He broke jerky pieces, offered one. Rowena's stomach growled, but she eyed it warily. Poisoning a 5 gold purchase would be poor business. Granger's half-smile vanished quickly, as though humor were foreign. She accepted. Salt and smoke flavors lit her tongue, awakening how ravenous she'd grown since dawn. Night spilled fast across the basin. Granger lit a single lantern, its glow cocooning them. He spread a bedroll for Rowena near the rock face, taking another 10 paces before laying his own. Respectful distance rare as freshwater pearls, Rowena lay staring at constellations and the sweep of the Milky Way. Questions stirred. Who was Beckett Granger? What sorrow carved those faint shadows around his mouth? But fatigue dragged eyelids heavy. She drifted into uneasy dreams of flour sacks toppling, burying her beneath powder, until gold coins rained from ruptured sky. Somewhere distant, a wolf howled. Dawn's chill woke Rowena. Frost-haloed sage leaves, thin fog clung to her braid. She found Granger already mounted, scanning west. His jaw was set, eyes narrowed. "What is it?" she whispered, heart leaping. "Dust." "Plume." He pointed to a faint smudge hugging the horizon. "Could be mustangs, could be pursuit." Rowena swallowed hard. Night's fragile calm shattered by possibility of gunfire. Granger dismounted, rummaged saddlebags, produced a sleek Spencer carbine. He checked the chamber, movements practiced but forcedly calm. "If they're Todd's men," she ventured, "they'll want me alive." He shook his head. A man who paid gold will fight to keep what he bought. They'll think to ransom you back. And you? Rowena surprised herself with the question. How far would you go to keep me? Free? He paused, staring at the dust trail, farther than they're willing to follow. But Rowena heard tension in that promise, a weight of history yet unspoken. They packed camp in record time. Granger swung her into the saddle before him riding double would sap the horse, but speed mattered more than longevity. They urged the gelding north along a game trail that snaked through juniper scrub. Sun climbed and the plume grew fatter, splitting into two distinct billows, multiple riders whipping steeds. Rowena's pulse hammered. She pressed gloved fingers against the pommel to steady herself. Granger leaned low, spurring the gelding. Brush slapped Rowena's calves, stinging, as they shot between boulders. At one point, Granger steered into a dry creek bed and followed it until hoof prints dissolved among thousands. They emerged at a rocky ledge overlooking Cedar Hollow proper, a lush valley cupped by towering cottonwoods with a ranch house set back from the main road. Smoke rose from its stone chimney. Granger exhaled in relief yet kept scanning. Almost home. As if fate mocked him, gunshots cracked behind. Echoes ricocheted off canyon walls. Dust riders burst into view half a mile back, spurring black horses hard, rifles glinting. Granger cursed, veering from the wagon track onto open grass where the gelding could stretch. The ranch lay across a shallow river. A single covered bridge spanned it 90 yards ahead. Rowena twisted to look. 6 riders? 7? She glimpsed Todd's slick pomaded hair at the forefront, lips peeled in greed. They're gaining. Hold on. Granger leaned forward, urging every ounce of speed. Thunder of hooves shook Rowena's spine. The bridge loomed, frail wooden beams rattling in wind. One loose board could shatter legs, but they had no choice. They hit the planks. The bridge groaned but held. Mid-span, Granger reined to a skidding. Halt! Rowena gasped at the whiplash. He slid off, thrust the reins into her trembling hands. Ride to the house, he commanded. Tell Foreman Saul to bar doors. What about you? He shifted the Spencer from shoulder to crook of arm and glanced at the riders closing fast. I paid gold. Todd will find out what a bargain he truly gave me. No, Rowena protested. You'll be killed. Granger's eyes softened for the first time since Coldwater. I've buried worse odds. Go, Rowena. Gunfire barked. A splinter hissed past, carving a line through Granger's sleeve. Rowena's breath hitched. Beckett, she whispered, using his given name as a plea. Trust me, he said, then slapped the gelding's flank. The horse bolted, nearly unseating Rowena. She twisted round just in time to see Granger drop to one knee at the far end of the bridge, lever the carbine, and fire. Wood chips flew. Todd's lead horse reared. Rowena clung to the saddle as the ranch house raced closer. Smoke from its chimney seemed suddenly comforting, a sign of normal life she'd never know if bullets quenched that flame behind her. Tears stung, but the wind sheared them away. Her heart screamed turn back. Her mind hissed survive. Every hoofbeat carried her away from the man who had gambled gold on her humanity. Then came a sound she'd known since childhood, the unmistakable crack of a support beam giving under strain. She yanked the reins, risking a glance. The bridge sagged ominously where Granger still knelt, and the first of Todd's men had already set hoof on the planks. Rowena's lungs seized. The bridge would not hold 8 horses, a gunman, and the memory of too many sins. It would shatter, and Beckett Granger would fall with it. The gelding skidded to a halt as Rowena wrenched its head around. She would not ride on to safety and leave him pinned beneath splinters and cold current. She would not be freight to trade again. She dug heels and launched back toward the river, heart overriding terror. Ahead, Beckett lifted eyes wide with shock as he saw her return. Todd's posse thundered forward. The center beam emitted a groan that sounded almost human. Rowena spurred harder, throat raw. "Hold on, Beckett." Thunder, wood cracking, shouts, frantic horses' time fused into a single heartbeat. The beam snapped. The center of the bridge dropped in a roar of splintering timber and choked curses. Riders pitched into flailing arcs. Horses screamed. Rowena's vision narrowed, dusting edges with white. She saw Beckett leap sideways, grabbing a dangling rope, a chance at survival. But Todd's grasping fingers closed around the same rope. Two men, gold buyer and flesh peddler, dangled over the churning river, boots kicking. Rifles lost to the deep. Rowena's horse lunged onto the first plank just as another rifle shot split the air, someone still atop the far bank. Aiming to decide which man would drop and which would climb, Rowena rose in the stirrups, meeting the rifleman's surprised gape across the void. She drew breath, voice cracking across the water. "Let him go, or you'll learn how sharp a woman's aim becomes when freedom's at stake." Far below, the rope fibers groaned, and the sun slipped behind a cloud, drawing shadow across every face. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The rope fibers sang in Rowena's ears, a low, mournful creak that vibrated through marrow and memory alike, while Beckett Granger and Abel Zeke Todd dangled over the swelled spring river. Spray frothed against split timbers. Lumber moaned under the weight of water and sign. Rowena's rifle felt heavy, like it carried not only iron and powder, but every debt the West had ever tried to settle by blood. She leveled the barrel at the rifleman on the opposite bank, a lanky thug whose name she did not know, whose raised weapon quivered between indecision and greed. "Drop it," she shouted, fighting to keep quake from her voice. "Or I swear, the next brand you carry'll be a bullet scar." The gunman blinked as though slapped. Perhaps he had never heard a woman speak with such steady promise before. His gaze darted left and right, seeking cues from a leader who, at that moment, kicked and cursed midair like a caught catfish. Then slowly he lowered his carbine. The metallic thunk of surrender rippled across the valley louder than any gunshot. Below the bridge, water-battered supports already gnawed by rot. Beckett's boots swung wide. One heel scraped Todd's coat, and Todd yelped, losing a fistful of damp velvet. River foam speckled his pomade, turning the merchant's slick black hair into a parody of Sunday dignity. The rope shredded one thread. "Further, hold on," Rowena cried. She urged the gelding forward another step onto groaning planks. The beast's eyes rolled white, sensing peril but trusting her weight more than the hollow echo of predators behind. She dismounted, thrust reins around a post that still seemed sturdy, and advanced on foot, rifle steady. "Saul!" Beckett bellowed, voice ragged but carrying. "Raise the block and tackle." Across the meadow, the ranch yard buzzed to life. A grizzled foreman, Saul Mathers, burst from the barn, barked orders at a pair of ranch hands, and sprinted toward a weathered windlass mounted near the riverbank. Chains clanged. Pulleys wailed. The ranch's old ferry rig, strung beneath the bridge for hauling hay, began to creep along its cable toward the stranded men. Rowena kept her gaze locked on Beckett, using it as a talisman against fear. The stranger who'd paid gold now bled from a cut along his temple. Crimson rivulets mixed with rainwater, dripping into swollen currents below. Todd fumed through bared teeth. "This is theft!" He shrieked despite peril. "That woman is mine by lawful trade." Rowena's cheeks burned. "I belong to no man, least of all one who weighs human beings like hog fat." She shifted her aim toward Todd's dangling form, daring him to argue further. Another thread snapped. Beckett's arms flexed, muscles strained beneath torn cotton. Rowena knew that if the rope gave entirely, they would plummet into rapids studded by limestone. Teeth She dropped to her belly on a still intact span, ignoring the dizzy sway beneath her, crawled forward, and reached out. "Take my hand." "Bridge'll fail," Beckett warned breathlessly, eyes urgent. "Get clear, I did not leave." "To watch you die," she retorted. "Your gold bought a chance at my life. I choose to spend it on yours." Surprise flickered behind his pain, followed by something fiercer, respect. He swung, timing the arc. Fingers brushed hers once, twice then. Latched like iron, Rowena dug her heels, bracing. Tendons screamed. Her shoulders felt fire. Behind them, Saul's makeshift ferry clanged against the upriver cable with agonizing sloth. One last fiber popped. Rowena yanked, hard. Beckett surged upward, Todd's grip on the rope failing with a squeal. The merchant flailed, scraped Beckett's. Boot Saul's, then slipped free. His scream stitched itself to gull cries overhead as he tumbled into froth. Water swallowed him with brutal indifference. Rowena nearly followed her boot, skidded across slimed wood, but Beckett seized her wrist, arresting the skid. Together they sprawled upon shattered planks. Chests heaving. The ferry swings into view. Two ranch hands aboard brandishing poles to steady the creaking platform. They dragged Beckett and Rowena onto its timber deck just as the span behind them collapsed wholesale, bridge halves tearing apart like paper. The gelding, still tied to a firmer post on the ranch side, whinnied terror but remained safe. Timbers thundered into water. Spray drenched all three. Saul cursed softly. "We'll have to rebuild come summer," he muttered, hauling rope to. "Tow the ferry shoreward. But first, patchin' you, boss." Beckett waved him off and turned to Rowena, voice hoarse. "You risked your life." "I reclaimed it," she replied, brushing wet hair from her face. "Seems fitting to reclaim yours in the bargain." Across the river, Todd's remaining guns stood slack-jawed. Without their leader and lacking bridge, they scattered, some riding south, others firing futile rounds into sky before galloping off. Rowena exhaled trembling relief. Cedar Hollow Ranch rested like a promise of order amid chaos. Whitewashed house, corrals latticed in fresh pine, smoke curling from stone chimney, diffusing scent of chicory coffee. Once inside, Rowena felt walls. Radiant warmth older than logs built from the daily kindness of those who called it home. Yet peace here hung fragile. Beckett's injury required tending, and Rowena's shaken core reeled from adrenaline's retreat, while Saul stitched Beckett's brow. Rowena explored the kitchen. Copper kettles, cast iron skillets worn slick with bacon grease, and a simple oak table scarred by years of supper knives greeted her. She washed trembling hands, then brewed willow bark tea she'd once learned eased pain. When she carried the steaming tin mug to Beckett, she noticed his gaze study her like a map of new frontier, each contour noted for future trust. "I owe you," he murmured, sipping. Bitter brew twisted his features before relief softened them. Not just life, the ranch too. If Todd's claim had stood, Rowena lifted a shoulder. "You employed the strongest argument, gold over flour." She tried to smile. "It came out brittle, but he won't forget defeat. Men like Todd reforge humiliation into fury, then we prepare." Beckett winced as Saul tied off the final stitch. "Todd'll rebuild bridge or circle to the ford north of the canyon." Saul scrubbed bloody hands on a rag. "Riders we saw wore cheap guns and cheaper nerve. They'll need fresh coin to mount second push." "Coin Todd now lacks," Beckett replied, "but I'll not gamble on his bankruptcy." He rose, testing balance, then wavered. Rowena sprang forward, steadying him by instinct. Their closeness sparked an awkward heat. They'd shared saddle leather for half a day, yet proximity now felt weighted with unsaid wonders. "Infirmary's upstairs," Rowena said, voice firmer than she felt. She guided him to a narrow staircase, lined by framed daguerreotypes. Beckett's parents in formal attire, a younger Beckett grinning beside a chestnut Mustang, A delicate woman with sun-hat sister perhaps. Each image hinted at stories Rowena dared not pry yet. She settled Beckett onto a linen-sheeted bed. Late afternoon sun cast honey stripes across quilt patches. Motes drifted like lazy fireflies. He studied her like she belonged to the light. Rest. She insisted. Stay, he countered. A single word, but it unraveled her resolve. She perched on a stool, clasping hands to quell tremor. Why me? She whispered after a stretch of ticking silence broken only by his slow breaths. Why? Spend 5 gold saddlebag on a stranger? Beckett's pale eyes drifted to a ceiling beam. Because someone once paid a ransom heavier than gold for me. Time, reputation, everything. And I squandered the chance. If I can tip the scales forward now, even one life, maybe I settle part of that debt. Rowena's throat thickened. No further explanations came. Pain or memory closed his eyes. She covered him with a quilt and slipped downstairs. Night-cloaked cedar, hollow with velvet frost by the time Rowena found Saul cleaning a Winchester under veranda lamplight. He glanced up, lines around his mouth etching deeper. Boss'll mend. Hard as rawhide, that one. I'll make broth come dawn, Rowena said, hugging her borrowed shawl. Across the yard, ranch hands loaded ammunition crates onto wagons, murmuring in low Spanish and English. You expect siege tonight. Maybe not until they loop around the North Ford tomorrow. Saul sighted down the barrel. Either way, we dig in. Rowena turned toward the darkness beyond paddocks. Coyotes yipped in distance like mocking applause for deaths. Performance. She remembered the rifleman on opposite bank, how fear had shone white in his eyes before he'd chosen to drop his gun. How many men might yet choose humanity if given a pause? And how many would load powder instead? She drew a breath. Teach me. Saul's brow furrowed. Teach? To shoot true, she clarified. I won't hide in cellar while others. Bleed on my account. He eyed her slender arms, measuring will rather than muscle. Sun up, behind barn. Bring the boss's old revolver Colt's lighter for your hands. That night Rowena slept little. Dreams churned a bridge collapsing. Over and over, Todd's glare burning through river spray. Beckett's pulse fluttering beneath her fingers. When dawn spilled silver over cottonwoods, she rose, tucked an apple in her pocket, and found Saul waiting. A week later, cedar pollen dusted everything gold, as if the valley itself celebrated resilience. Rowena's days filled with tasks. Once unimaginable, mucking stalls beside a freckled ranch hand named Cora, stirring stew for 11 hungry workers, practicing revolver draw until palm blistered. Beckett, stitches out and brow scar, now a faint pink crescent, taught her the ranch ledger after supper columns of grazing yields, water rights and grain contracts. She felt muscles bloom beneath calico sleeves, felt laughter return in brief. Bursts, such as the night she beat Saul at horseshoes, and Beckett's jaw had dropped in delighted shock. Yet shadow lingered. Every dusk Rowena scanned ridgelines for dust clouds that might sprout. Todd's vengeance. Her vigilance proved wise. It began with a cowhand galloping in from the north trail, horse lathered. Riders 15, maybe 20 camping at Devil's. Butte, he gasped. Beckett unsheathed field glasses. Rowena hovered as he sighted the butte through upstairs window. Too many flags, he muttered, adjusting focus. Todd hired mercenaries. Saul spat chew into tin, ex-Confederate guns. They'll charge cheap, shoot swift. Rowena's chest tightened. She had expected Todd to lick wounds, maybe. Slither out of territory. Instead, he'd returned with war. They'll reach the North Ford by dawn. Bridges down. They'll cross shallow gravel. Beckett spun, gaze flint. Saul, barricade the Ford-fell cottonwood trunks, set wire. Cora, move cattle to south pasture. Rowena, I know, she interrupted, already collecting cartridge belt. Ammunition inventory. Field dressing table. Coffee percolator for night watch. He paused, soft pride creasing brow. Stay inside range walls when guns fire. She strapped the Colt low, meeting his eyes. I'll stay alive. But I won't. Cower. Outside, dusk cooled to indigo, and the ranch yard transformed into fortress. Men stacked feed wagons as breastwork. Women sharpened fence stakes. Lanterns were hooded to narrow beams. Rowena knelt by Beckett's side in the barn, rolling dynamite sticks into burlap satchels for Saul to bury amid brush shoots near Ford. Her mind strayed to Todd. Had River spat him out, or had his hired killers dredged him onto gravel? Would the man who sold her by weight now value her scalp by another measure? When row of stars crowned the valley, Rowena and Beckett climbed windmill ladder to scout. Pine silhouettes bristled under moon. Between them high-tension hummed shared dread. And budding trust weaving invisible thread. You could still ride east. Reach Fort Laramie by dawn, Beckett said suddenly. Safe behind garrison walls, Rowena leaned on railing. I rode away from chains into this fight. If I run again, I carry chains within. She glanced sideways, adding softly, Besides, I still owe you at least 4 sacks of flowers. Worth of wages. His laugh cut brittle night. Then quiet settled, a hush so complete they heard an owl's wing brush air. They did not need more words. Their shoulders touched, and it was enough. Gunfire shattered dawn. Rowena jolted awake in bunkhouse loft where she'd catnapped fully clothed. She rolled to feet, Colt already drawn. Outside, Saul's booming voice directed crossfire as mercenaries surged across Ford fog. Rifle cracks. Stitched air. Return shots pinged off corrals. Rowena sprinted to main house porch. Cora tossed her a Winchester. Thought you might want longer reach. She barked before diving behind water trough. Rowena scrambled onto porch roof, belly crawled. Between shingles and sighted the valley. Mercenaries advanced in 2 flanking columns, firing from horseback, revolvers flashing. Todd, yes, Todd. Road center, arm in sling, face bruised but alive. Hatchet anger twisted his features. Rowena's pulse roared, but hands steadied. She sighted, breath out, squeezed trigger. The nearest gunman toppled sideways, his horse bucked riderless. Distant screams mixed with spooked cattle bellows. Below, Beckett emerged from barn leading 3 ranch hands. He gestured. Dynamite wires hissed. A geyser of dirt erupted as buried charge hurled 2 mercenaries skyward. The explosion's roll bounced across valley, rattling window panes. Todd's force faltered, hoof lines bunching. Yet more riders poured from tree-lined reserves Rowena hadn't counted. They fanned south, seeking flank, Cora's furious Spanish. Orders cracked across yard. Women and younger hands dragged flour sacks from storage, stacking them behind hitch rails as improvised bulwark. Rowena marveled at irony. Todd's chosen currency now shielded her from his bullets. She chambered, fired again. She forced slow exhale, reacquired nearest target. Trigger, a merc fell. His partner whirled, spotted Rowena's perch, and raised repeater. She rolled sideways as slate splintered where her head had been. Rowena skidded off far side of roof, grabbed gutter edge, and dropped to straw pile below. Breath punched out but ribs intact. She scrambled behind rain barrel, heart hammering. Beckett spotted her, relief flashing before he returned to firing. Flames flickered near bunkhouse door lantern, knocked over by ricochet spread tongues along. Haystack, Saul hollered bucket brigade. Rowena dashed to pump, heaved water, doused creeping fire until smoke choked eyes. Shots thudded into wall inches away, showering her with splinters. She ducked, glimpsed Todd 30 yards out. Aiming pistol cold as Winter Dot, he shouted, voice hoarse, "Hand over the girl, and I spare the lot of you." Beckett answered with bullet that snapped Todd's brim clean off. The merchant's eyes bulged. He yanked reins, retreating behind cohort. Rowena willed pounding heart calm. She needed vantage. Smoke bloomed thick. Watchers coughed. She sprinted inside house, clattering upstairs 2 at a time. In Beckett's study, she smashed window with butt of spare rifle, creating sniping shelf. Below, Todd's men regrouped under cottonwood stand. Rowena tracked their leader, her gun angled downward. Crosshairs hovered over sling-wrapped shoulder. She hesitated. Killing Todd could end siege, but part of her recoiled from taking life. Beckett's earlier words about debt and redemption flickered. From corner of eye she saw flash another Merc raised Spencer, sighted Beckett's exposed flank. Rowena shifted, fired without thought. Shot punched through Mercenary's chest. He crumpled. Beckett spun, nodded gratitude. Todd saw the exchange. Crimson fury consumed his face. He barked an order. 2 riders peeled off, galloping toward ranches. Grain barn. Lantern flame still weak there, an easy tinderbox. Rowena cursed. She sprinted to back stair, vaulted railing, and dashed across yard. Gunfire zipped overhead. She cut through orchard, using trunks as shield, and intercepted riders. Near fence break. Colt drawn, she stepped onto path, legs trembling. Turn back. She commanded. The first rider sneered, rifle leveled. Rowena squeezed quick double tap. Bullets snapped wood past his ear. Horse skittered, rider lost seat, crashed into mud. Second swung lariat, but Rowena shot rope mid-loop. Frayed fibers exploded like dandelion seeds. Horse reared. Rider clamped but retreated. Rowena advanced, heart pounding. She'd never imagined such deadly calm could inhabit her skin. A shot. From behind clipped her sleeve. She pivoted, glimpsed Todd deeper among trees. Pistol smoking. Fury fermented into resolve. Rowena strode forward, ignoring Branch's whipping face. Todd saw death in her eyes. His retort faltered. He stumbled backward. Into underbrush, wincing at sling. Rowena raised Colt. No more sails, she said. No more chains. Todd's lip trembled. Your property paper says. She fired. Bullet bit earth by his boot. He yelped, threw pistol aside, and raised hands. You wouldn't, he croaked. I choose who I become, Rowena hissed. She cocked hammer again. Todd's gulp echoed like swallowed nails. Rowena's finger pressured, then eased. Killing Todd would end pursuit, but it would also bind her future to death's weight. She lowered weapon. Crawl to the ford, she ordered. Tell your hired devils the auction's closed. Todd gaped. They'll kill me. Rowena's eyes steeled. That's between you and the river gods. He turned, scrambling over roots, vanished. Relief swept Rowena, abrupt enough to buck knees. She inhaled pine-laced air. At ranch clearing, mercenaries seeing Todd flee broke ranks. Some dropped guns, galloping north. Others surrendered to ranch hands now surging fence line. By sunset. Cedar Hollow still stood. Cattle lowed nervously, but fences held, barn smolder quenched, and mercenaries bound in rope circles awaited circuit judge. Beckett, dust-caked and hollow-eyed, found Rowena leaning against apple tree, hands shaking belatedly. You spared him, he said quietly. I spared myself, she corrected. Killing Todd would brand me with his cruelty. Beckett considered. Mercy is heavier than lead. She nodded, studying scratches on his knuckles. Siege is over? For now, he murmured. Territory law will handle the rest. But Todd has allies in county office. Rowena faced fading horizon where clouds burned orange. Then we make our case louder than his lies. Saul approached, brow creased. Riders spotted smoke on South Ridge. Looks like more trouble, someone torching signal fires. Rowena and Beckett traded weary glances. Todd's friends? She asked. Or the railroad company wanting our water rights? Beckett mused grimly. Either way, another storm. Rowena holstered Colt, straightened sore shoulders. Then we saddle up. Bridge may be gone, but we've built something. Sturdier here. She gestured toward house, ranch hands, newly liberated prisoners of circumstance. A family. Beckett's hand brushed hers, tentative, anchor-seeking. She squeezed back. Together they walked toward rising column of smoke, footsteps in measured rhythm with heartbeat and hope. Ahead, hills glowed ember red against velvet dusk, promising fresh trials and forging fires. And beneath Rowena's ribs, courage pulsed steady as hoofbeats ready to meet tomorrow. Twilight's final embers had barely cooled to indigo when Rowena and Beckett rode south along the ridgeline, shadowed by Saul and Cora 100 yards back. Sparks of fresh-lit signal fires dotted distant hills like malignant stars, painting the horizon with a sullen glow. Each new flare hissed skyward, then unfurled columns of oily smoke that mingled into a single smudge, a bruise marking where peace had been struck. Rowena's borrowed gelding moved at a ground-eating lope, hooves thudding a drumbeat that echoed thunder still coiled in her pulse. She glanced sideways at Beckett astride his Appaloosa stallion. The man's brow bore healing scar, yet lines of sleepless vigilance spidered from the corners of his eyes. War had visited Cedar Hollow twice. A third time might raise more than barns below. A coyote yipped, then another, nearer, as though the land itself whispered warnings. Beckett raised 2 fingers, halt. They reined in near a limestone spur and dismounted, leading horses into wind-bent juniper. The faint roar of a locomotive drifted on air, now tinged with coal soot. Rowena exchanged a glance with Cora, whose freckles disappeared beneath a smear of ash from earlier fires. Rail lines less than a mile east. Beckett murmured, pulling field glasses from saddlebag. Sinclair's spur track. He scanned valley until the glasses froze. Devils, they're burning slash piles across our irrigation ditch. Rowena took the binoculars. In Moon's frail light, she saw men in pinstripe suits, railroad surveyors, no doubt overseeing roughnecks who heaped sagebrush, lit kerosene, then shoved ablaze tangles into the still-running canal Beckett had carved years ago. Steam billowed as water quenched flame, but embers lodged against flume walls, threatening collapse. That ditch feeds a third of Cedar Hollow, Saul growled, fitting a shell into his Winchester. And Wheatstone Town downstream, sabotage threatens them all. Beckett's jaw tightened. Sinclair must be furious. Todd failed twice. He'll destroy the ranch to force a sale. Rowena calculated. Canal breached would parch crops, cripple cattle, strangle finances. We stopped them tonight. 30 men at least, Cora cautioned. Rifles and torches. And lawyers, Beckett added grimly. Sinclair leverages both. Rowena's fingers drifted to holstered Colt. Bullets first, briefs later. Beckett managed wan smile. That's become your motto. He slipped a coil of dynamite fuses into coat pocket. We'll cut their nerve, instead blow the supply wagons with kerosene, force retreat. Less blood, more message. They hashed plan in hurried whispers. Saul and Cora would circle west through cottonwoods, flanking supply carts. Beckett and Rowena would ride canal bank, fire dynamite from high ground. Then all regroup at Cedar Grove north of ditch. Simple on parchment, fatal if mistimed. Before we go, Beckett said, voice so low Rowena felt it more than heard it. He touched leather string around his neck, extracted a ring plain gold band battered by time. My mother's, he explained. She believed hope should travel. He pressed it into Rowena's palm. Return when we ride home. Rowena stared at the ring-glinting moonshine. Heat bloomed in chest. And if we don't? Then bury it deep, he answered, so roots someday carry it to daylight. She slid the band onto a chain beneath her dress. We'll return. Beckett mounted and offered hand. Rowena swung up behind him, arms encircling his waist. A subtle tremor passed through him, fear or something gentler, and Rowena felt her own courage crystallize. They nudged horses downslope. The burning ditch loomed, flickering like a serpent's coil. Sparks drifted across alfalfa. igniting patches that ranch hands would smother come dawn, if dawn still found Cedar Hollow sovereign. Rowena counted 6 kerosene wagons lashed together near track siding. Guards paced, rifles glinting. Beckett halted under cottonwood canopy. "Fuse time 15 seconds, he whispered, handing Rowena 2 sticks bound by twine. "You toss to rear wagon, I to front. We ride like devils east before blast." Rowena nodded. She'd practiced with dynamite, but never amid enemy guns. They dismounted, testing footing on sandy bank. Feet silent, they crept closer. A roughneck squatted to relieve himself by ditch, muttering about damn greedy railroad baron. Rowena held breath until he shuffled off. She and Beckett reached. First wagon barrel sloshed within. Beckett struck match behind crate. Lit fuse, dropped bundle through slatted side. Rowena sprinted low to second wagon. Fuse spark hissed in her shaking fingers. She lobbed dynamite into tarp-covered kerosene drums. Voices shouted guard, spotted her silhouette against firelit ditch. Rifle cracked, bark exploded near her ear. She dove behind wheel, mud splashing. Beckett whistled piercing note they'd agreed on, and Rowena scrambled, fuse sizzling close behind. They raced for horses as gunfire chased. 15 seconds stretched into eternity, then night fractured. A blossom of orange engulfed wagons. Allied barrels erupted in chain roar. Heat slapped Rowena's back, flinging her forward. She scrambled onto saddle. Horse bolted in terror. Secondary blasts popped like overripe corn, flinging burning staves skyward. Surveyors shrieked orders. Roughnecks fled. One brave fool fired at retreating pair. Bullet grazed Beckett's hat brim. Rowena pivoted, snapped 2 shots into ground before his boots warning. The man dove for cover. They tore upslope, reined at predetermined Cedar Grove. Saul and Cora arrived moments later, panting but unhurt. Behind them, canal fires guttered. With wagons destroyed, sabotage teams scattered. Farther off, locomotive. Whistle wailed, a furious scream of metal denied. Beckett dismounted, gripping saddle horn until tremor eased. Saul clapped his shoulder. "Pretty fireworks," the foreman chuckled, but Cora pointed north, face draining. "Company coming." A posse's lanterns bobbed along County Road, dozen riders, maybe more, led by silhouettes of shiny stars. The sheriff, Rowena's pulse kicked. The man beneath that star owed Sinclair more than backroom favors. Sinclair telegraphed claim of vandalism. Beckett guessed, eyes narrowing. They'll spin explosion as assault. Rowena sheathed Colt. "We can prove sabotage ditch charred by Sinclair's torches." "Truth's moot if cuffs close first," Saul warned. Beckett exhaled. "I'll talk them down. Rowena, stay behind. They still want you as lever." "No," she snapped. "These chains break tonight fully." Posse thundered up, dust shrouding. Cedar Grove. Sheriff Vernon Tall, a rotund figure in tailored vest, swung down. His badge caught lantern glow like tarnished brass. "Beckett Granger," he boomed, voice coated in syrupy accusation. "You're under arrest for destruction of railroad property and probable homicide." He jerked chin at deputies who advanced with irons. Beckett stepped forward, arms raised. "Sheriff, your legal warrant is as burnt as those wagons. Sinclair's men attacked our canal." Deputies seized Beckett's arms anyway, twisting behind. Back, Rowena's vision tunneled red. Tall spotted her, grin widening. "And the runaway indenture. Sinclair's affidavit lists you property of Abel Todd. Currently missing, presumed deceased." "You'll come too," Rowena bristled. "That contract was void. Todd sold me against my will, no witness." The sheriff shrugged. "Judge Barlow. We'll sort facts. Until then, jail." Cora stepped forward, fists nodding. Saul's rifle angled, tension crackled. Rowena met Beckett's gaze, silent plea to avoid blood. He shook head subtly. She unclipped Colt belt, let it fall. Deputy cuffed. her hands cold iron abrading fresh rope burns. Sheriff ordered posse back to Coldwater Jail. Cora whispered an oath, promising rescue. Rowena locked eyes with Beckett as they were hoisted onto separate horses. Under guard, they began the ride west, smoke and dynamite glow receding behind. Cedar silhouettes, moon-climbed, bathing prairie in silver. Rowena's wrists throbbed. Iron links jingled a rhythm of indignation. Beside her, Beckett rode stiffly but managed a faint, reassuring nod. She nodded back, clutching chain, hidden. Ring near heart dot in distance. A freight locomotive chuffed, lights glaring like judgment. Yet Rowena's mind plotted. At dawn, she and Beckett would stand before Judge Barlow, a man whose pockets jingled Sinclair's coins. Evidence would be buried deeper than Flume remains. Unless Rowena unearthed something bigger, she recalled. Railway survey maps Beckett had shown her land deeds proving Cedar Hollow's water rights created Sinclair's charter. Copies locked in ranch safe, but an original filed at county registry in Coldwater Courthouse. If she reached that document, she could turn Sinclair's own paper bullets against him. Possibility flared. She leaned toward Beckett, whisper carrying. A night air, registry. He angled head, understanding flickering. He mouthed, North Alley, then closed eyes as if dozing. A plan birthed itself between heartbeats. Rowena studied posse formation, counted rifles, noted dozing deputy. At every third mile. With luck, chain weight, and a little dynamite residue still lining her sleeve cuffs, a lock might fail. Ahead, Coldwater Junction's wan gaslights appeared, shimmering like a mirage of false safety. Rowena's pulse steadied, forging calm into blade. Chains might bind wrists, but freedom now lived behind her ribs, fierce and bright as sunrise. She flexed fingers, feeling gold band kiss skin through fabric. Whatever dawn brought, trial, cell, or gallows, Rowena Maddox would not stand. Weighed by another man's scales ever again. Night clung to Coldwater Junction like cold dust, seeping into every cracked board and crook alleyway. As Sheriff Vernon Tall's posse paraded the prisoners down Main Street, Rowena Maddox, wrists bitten red by iron, and Beckett Granger. Hat brim still singed from dynamite fire, the townsfolk stirred behind half-drawn curtains. Windows flickered with lamplight, then darkened, as if the very buildings turned their backs. Somewhere a piano banged ragtime in the Silver Star Saloon, where just months earlier Rowena herself had been auctioned like grain. The tune faltered when the marchers passed. A single wrong chord hung in the night air before the music rebounded. Brash and oblivious, Rowena shivered despite summer heat. Chains rattled with each step, echoing her pulse. Beckett walked beside her, cuffed but tall, casting a shadow longer. Then the others, proof that some legends could not be shackled entirely. Ahead loomed the squat adobe jailhouse, its barred windows blinking amber. Judge Bartholomew Barlow's office occupied the adjoining annex, a brickade on whose slate roof gleamed like freshly sharpened steel. Inside, Deputy Ames shoved them into separate cells. Iron doors clanged, reverberations settling into Rowena's sternum. The cell smelled of lye, stale sweat, and the residual despair of forgotten drifters. Faint chalk markings marred stone names scraped by previous occupants, hoping memory might outlive flesh. Rowena swallowed the taste of memory. Auction blocks, rope burns, the river's roar. Sheriff Tall stood between the cells, round belly straining pinstripe vest, badge crooked. Court convenes 8 sharp, he wheezed. Judge Barlow's. Partial to punctuality, he tipped hat mockingly at Rowena. Rest easy, Miss Flowerweight. Rowena's eyes met Beckett's across corridor. No words, only nods. Trust, resolve, a sliver of promise. Tall locked office door behind him, footsteps receded. Laughter drifted from front desk as deputies debated whiskey versus rye. Then silence. Broken only by cicadas, Rowena sat on narrow cot. Moonlight trickled through barred window, sketching lattice across floor. She reached under sleeve cuff, pried out a sliver of dynamite fuse she'd concealed earlier. The sulfur wick felt rough, but pliable. Next, she extracted a bent hairpin from her braid gift from Cora the night before. She glanced at Beckett. He tilted head, urging. Steel meets silence. Hairpin explored lock. Nudging tumblers taught by Saul's impromptu lessons in barn. Minutes. Crawled. Finally, a click. Hinge creaked as Rowena eased door outward a hair's breadth, then froze at shuffle of boots. A deputy strolled hallway, lantern swaying. Rowena snapped door shut, heart hammering. The guard paused, sniffed, then moved on, mumbling about biscuits. Breath returning, Rowena waited until lantern glow vanished. She opened door fully. Cat stepped to Beckett's cell. Hairpin worked again, quicker now with adrenaline guide. Lock surrendered. Beckett emerged, rubbing wrists. "We fetch registry," Rowena whispered, "and persuade Truth to speak louder." "Then Sinclair's silver," Beckett replied. He checked corridor. Coast clear. They padded toward rear service door, passing evidence closet. Beckett paused, retrieving his confiscated revolver, Rowena's Colt, and a rolled sheaf registry reference map Deputy Morgan must have logged. Rowena pocketed map. Back exit opened into alley rank with horse manure. Overhead, clouds scudded. Veiling moon. They slid along wall until alley spit onto Pine Street. Across way stood County Records office, shutters drawn. A single lamppost flickered at corner, throwing pools of uncertain light. Voices rose from saloon direction. Deputies. Bragging. They hadn't yet discovered empty cells. Time bled fast. Rowena and Beckett sprinted across street, pressed to Records' door. Locked but old, wood swollen, latch simple. Beckett produced screwdriver, pilfered from evidence shelf, jimmied plate. Door side inward. Inside, dust motes danced among stacked ledgers. Rowena unfolded map, traced finger to Land Grant Cedar Hollow 1872 Water Appropriation Decree. She scanned cubbies until spotting corresponding ledger label. They hauled tome to desk, lantern lit, penning pages yellowed but intact. Rowena's finger followed paragraph. Rights absolute, canal path recorded prior to railway charter. She ripped sheet free, then another cross-reference including notary seal. Evidence dot, but footfalls clomped outside. Lantern bobbing. Beckett doused flame, pulled Rowena behind filing cabinet. Front door flew open. Sheriff Tall lumbered in. Rifle raised, deputies flanking. Search, Granger's loose. Rowena's breath hitched. She and Beckett exchanged glance. Fight or conceal. She eased Colt from sash. Beckett mirrored. Deputies fanned aisles. A boot scraped near their hideout. Rowena gripped Beckett's forearm, silent count of approaching steps. At 3, she pivoted. Firearm hammer cocked, pressing barrel into deputy's ribs. "Quiet," she hissed. Beckett disarmed man, delivered chop to temple. Deputy crumpled dot noise drew others. Gunfire erupted. Rowena dove behind desk, parchment. Clutched, splinters sprayed. She popped up, fired twice. Lantern burst, casting office in gloom. Another deputy yelped. Chaos churned. Sheriff Tall roared. "Hold fire." Records. Yet muzzle flashes continued. Pages burst into flares. Smoke thickened. Rowena and Beckett slipped out rear window as flames licked shelves. They landed in weed-choked drainage. Rowena cursed, registry now burning behind them. But she still gripped extracted pages. Beckett glanced, relief flickering. Siren bell clanged as town fire patrol roused. Horses waited behind livery. They'd stabled posse mounts earlier. Beckett selected stout mare, Rowena a nimble roan. Hooves pounded. Dark streets toward outskirts. Gunfire behind lessened, drowned by shouts, "Fire!" Near Ridge Road, silhouettes rose. Saul Cora, 2 ranch hands armed. Rowena's chest swelled at Ali's arrival. "Thought you'd need welcome wagon," Saul grinned. "Registry?" Cora asked. "In hand, but jailbreak means bounty," Beckett said. "Judge sits 8. We need deliver evidence to Territorial Circuit in Carson City, beyond Sinclair's reach." "That's 3-day ride," Saul noted. "We'll push," Rowena said. "Or Cedar Hollow dries." They rode through dawn. Sun-painted buttes rose gold. Dust trailed like comets. By noon, they reached Bitter Creek past shortest route but treacherous. Here railway company workers sometimes ambushed freight. Rowena positioned pages inside oilskin pouch under vest. Switchbacks climbed limestone cliffs. Hooves echoed. Beckett scanned ravines. "We're watched," he murmured. Indeed, dust plume behind indicated pursuers. Sheriff's posse reinforced. By Sinclair men, Rowena's heart hammered. Pass narrowed ahead to ledge barely 2 horses wide. Beyond, rope bridge spanned gorge. Saul cursed. "We cross. Cut ropes behind. They'll detour." Groups spurred forward. Wind whistled through gorge, carrying hawk cries. Wooden slats creaked under weight as first horses trotted across. Cora glanced down white water foam 200 feet below. Halfway, gunshot barked. Rowena flinched. Bullet clipped rope strands above. Fibers snapped. Bridge lurched. She forced. Roan onward. From cliff lip, Sinclair's sharpshooter recocked rifle. Another slug tore plank front of Saul's mount. Boards split, horse screamed. Rowena reached far side. Dismounted, looped reins, spun, and drew Colt. She targeted shooter's muzzle, flash squeezed miss. Shooter retreated behind boulder. Beckett galloped last, bullets flensing air. Cora, still mid-span, hollered as cable fiber parted with twang. Rowena dashed to anchor post, hacking a backup rope with Bowie knife. "Off the bridge!" she yelled. Cora kicked Mare. Boards cracking behind. Beckett leapt onto solid ground. Cora followed. Rowena severed rope. Bridge sagged, snapping away just as posse lead reached first plank. Men cursed as structure peeled. Collapsing into froth. Safe for moment, group rode again. Sunset bled across desert when they camped near Mormon Well. Beckett tended horses while Rowena traced travel map. 2 more ridges, then valley to Carson. She felt exhaustion like lead, but dare not sleep long. She volunteered first watch. Stars ignited above, infinite. Beckett joined. "You saved them," he said quietly. "Shared debt," she replied, fingering chain with his mother's ring. "Besides, I like bridges," he huffed soft laugh. Silence stretched companionable. Rowena studied his profile. Scar still healing, eyes reflecting constellations. "When we deliver deed, court may still side with money," she said. "Law bends to evidence if public sees," he countered. "We'll hold hearing in open hall, invite newspaper." Rowena nodded, though doubt coiled. She gazed at Ring. "Your mother, what was her name?" "Lydia Granger. Taught reading to frontier children." Beckett's voice grew gentle. "She said stories keep hope alive when bullets fail." Rowena smiled wistfully. She'd like this one. Dawn found them riding again. Yet desert offered new obstacle. Railroad barricade across Track Valley. Flat cars locked side by side. Armed guards patrolled. Sinclair anticipated their route. Saul whistled low. "We try skirt cliffs East Lose." "A day." "No," Rowena said. She scanned blockade, spotted telegraph pole cluster at edge. "We cut wire send message of our own." She retrieved dynamite satchel saved from barn. Plan formed quick. Cora and Hans create diversion north. Beckett and Rowena breach telegraph hut. Send evidence copy to Carson judge via wire. Saul covers escape. They split. Rowena's pulse thrummed as she crawled through sage toward hut. Guards paced wood walkway above rails. Rowena waited until Cora's group fired shots at distant ridge. Guards scrambled. Rowena darted to Hut Beckett. Behind. Inside, switchboard clicked. Telegraph operator, glancing out window, startled as Colt pressed cheek. Tap this exactly, Rowena ordered, sliding deed pages onto desk. She recited Carson legal operator address, code phrases Saul taught. Priority legal, water rights theft, require injunction. Man's fingers trembled but obeyed, keys clacking urgent staccato. Rowena watched strip spool, delivering deed summary across wires. Outside, guards returned as diversion ended. Beckett barricaded door with crate. Bullets thudded planks. Rowena grabbed dynamite, lit fuse placed by far wall. They hustled operator out rear hatch, sprinted to horses. Explosion rocked blockade. Flat car nearest hut toppled, scattering guards. They escaped south, dust cloaking pursuit path. By dusk, Carson City's church steeple pierced horizon. Relief. Warred with fatigue. Yet courthouse lamps blazed. They'd convened special night session upon receiving wire. Inside rotunda, Judge Harold Jefferson, a stern spectacles man, welcomed them with deputy marshal. Telegraph deed admitted as evidence. Sinclair's attorney present, sputtering objections. Judge ordered stay against railroad actions until full territorial review. Commended Rowena and Beckett for safeguarding original grant under duress. Victory. Tasted like cool spring water, but Rowena felt unease. Sinclair's power ran deep. She and Beckett exited courthouse into lamplit street. Press reporters swarmed, scribbling notes. One asked Rowena, "Miss Maddox, how does it feel to bring down empire with parchment?" She considered. "A scale tips when truth weighs more than gold," she answered softly. Beckett squeezed her hand. Cheering crowd accompanied them to hotel, where Governor offered protection. Yet under cheers Rowena sensed thunder of new storm Sinclair would strike back through shadows money buys. That night, Rowena dreamed of flour sacks toppling again, but this time they burst into blossoms, seeds scattering across valley. She awoke with tear on cheek, unsure if of grief or joy. Next morning, Telegraph delivered chilling news. Sheriff Tall found murdered in his office, throat slit, evidence vault ransacked, Sinclair's men covering tracks. Rowena and Beckett exchanged grim looks. The fight was far from over. As they prepared to ride for Cedar Hollow under Marshall's escort, a young court clerk rushed with telegram. "Stop. Todd alive. Bought posse. Riding south with 30 men. Estimated arrival Cedar Hollow 2 days." Stop. Rowena's stomach knotted. She thought of Cora, Saul, cattle, children in bunkhouse. "We go," she said. Marshall insisted on escort. Beckett argued time critical. Rowena stepped between. "We take fastest horses right ahead. Marshall follows with troops." Judge consented reluctantly. At dawn, Rowena and Beckett galloped north, hearts tethered to valley. Clouds massed, promising storm. Rowena's gaze fixed on horizon, where home waited and war again brewed. Half-day later, they reached Mesa Ridge. From here, Cedar Hollow's canyon mouth visible. Smoke curls darkened sky, too much for campfires. Rowena's heart sank. They urged horses into desperate sprint. On descent, they met fleeing ranch hand, face bloodied. Todd's Gand hit at first light. Burned south pasture. Cora and Saul hold house but outnumbered. Beckett's eyes blazed. He gripped Rowena's arm. "We end this." Rowena drew Colt, checked cylinder. Muscles trembled from ride, yet heart steeled. Together, they crested final hill. Cedar Hollow sprawled below, half shrouded in smoke. Gunfire echoed. Rowena saw Todd at head of column, sling replaced by iron brace, hatred carved deeper. Mercenaries set fire lines. Rowena inhaled, feeling every moment auction block, rope strands. Registry ink coalesce into singular resolve. She nudged horse forward. Beckett followed. 2 against 30, odds scrawled across dust. But behind them thundered fresh hoofbeats. The marshal's detachment cresting hill, bugle sounding charge. Todd turned, eyes widening as cavalry banners snapped. Rowena felt ring warm against skin, as if Lydia Granger's hope pulsed through gold. They rode. Bullets whined. Rowena fired, Beckett fired, troopers fired, a symphony of reckoning. Todd's men scattered. Flames guttered as water brigades surged. Rowena leapt from saddle, rolled, came up behind Otsilo, shooting north flank. When smoke cleared, survivors dropped arms. Todd, cornered at tool shed, raised shotgun at Rowena. She leveled Colt. "Last chance," she called, voice carved by wind. "Surrender. Live," he sneered, eyes manic. Never again weighed by a woman. He squeezed trigger, misfire, damp powder. Rowena's shot rang a deliberate graze across shoulder, spinning him. Todd fell, shrieking. Marshall cuffed Todd, Reed charges. Rowena exhaled century-old breath. Cora emerged soot, streaked, hugged Rowena until ribs creaked. Saul tipped hat, tears in cragged lines. Sun-dipped, painting. Valley gold. Beckett stood amid burned pasture, eyes reflecting flame-kissed horizon. Rowena approached. He opened arms. She stepped in, feeling heartbeats sink. Above them, smoke thinned into sky, blending with clouds that promised rain, not ruin, but renewal. Rowena pressed ring into Beckett's palm. Roots delivered it to daylight. He slid it onto her finger instead, and hope found home. Thunder rumbled, but gentle rain arriving. Drops spattered dust, hissing soft lullaby. Fire embers fizzled, and the land breathed. Yet as dusk settled, a lone rider watched from canyon lip. Sinclair's fixer, notes scribbled into ledger. War of water rights might cool, but new battles, railroads, politicians, land barons waited in wings. Rowena lifted gaze, meeting Watcher's silhouette across valley. Even through dusk, she saw him startle at the fierceness of her stare. He turned, spurred horse, vanished. Beckett followed her gaze. "More coming." Rowena intertwined fingers with his. "Let them. We've weighed ourselves and found worth." They walked toward ranch house where survivors gathered, children cheering dawn of rain. Night would hold stories of courage, of a woman once sold for flour, now standing in gold of her own forge. Tomorrow would demand more grit, but tonight belonged to healing. Smoke feathered upward from the south ridge, gray against sunrise, pink like a warning flag scribbled across the sky. Rowena Maddox inhaled the acrid bite, tasting drought and pine tar on her tongue, and felt the old knot of dread cinch tighter. Beneath sternum, Cedar Hollow Ranch stood behind her, battered but breathing, its fences patched with fresh timber and its people nursing bruises instead of burying bodies. Yet the valley could not catch breath before another fist came swinging. She rode beside Beckett Granger, their horses skirting dew-slit grass. Saul and Cora followed with 4 ranch hands, each armed. A crisp wind whipped Rowena's braid across cheek, stinging skin already raw from nights without sleep. Ahead the ridge rose steep, its flanks carved by goat trails and gullies. Smoke gusted in rhythmic puffs, controlled burns, not wildfire. Someone signaled. Rowena's gaze sharpened. If that's Todd's ally, they're calling muster. Beckett's jaw flexed. He surveyed terrain through spyglass. No visible campfires. Just the column. Cora urged Palomino forward, freckles stark on pale worry. Could be miners clearing brush. Rowena shook head. Nothing to clear, and miners don't post lookouts. She pointed where 2 silhouettes stood at ridge crest, rifles slung high. Saul spat brown stream. Railroad scouts again. Sinclair. Ain't done. Beckett lowered glass. We meet them before they finish writing their report. They pressed horses into climb. Hooves clattered stone. Scree rattled downslope. Rising sun warmed backs, but air thinned, filling lungs with copper. Tang, Rowena scanned gullies, half expecting ambush. Memories of Todd's mercenaries still gnawed nerves. She tightened grip on Colt and saddle holster. At shoulder of ridge, Beckett raised palm. Halt. They dismounted, tethered mounts in brush. Rowena crouched beside him, watching watchers. 2 men indeed, one in bowler hat, one bare-headed with salt white hair, both studying valley through telescopes. Between them, a tripod of smoke pots smoldered. "They haven't spotted us," Beckett whispered. He unsheathed a knife. "We'll scare them off." Rowena laid hand on his arm. "And if they carry orders, easier to destroy." She recalled registry pages, a reminder that paper could wield heavier artillery than rifles. "We need intel." Saul murmured, "Take him quiet." Rowena nodded. She and Beckett slipped uphill, weaving amid scrub. 20 yards out, a twig snapped beneath Rowena's boot. Rifleman spun, eyes wide, but she was already vaulting boulder. She landed behind him. Colt leveled. The man froze. Meanwhile, Beckett lunged at Bowler Hat Scout, pinning arms and relieving him of sidearm. Rowena gestured for them to drop surveying instruments. "Names." "Wallace Finch," stammered Bowler, windpipe pinned by Beckett's forearm. "I'm foreman for Sinclair Pacific, Contracts Division." The gray-haired rifleman swallowed. "Nathaniel Shore, Survey Chief." Rowena stepped closer, boots flaking ash from smoke pots. "Why the signal fires?" Finch's narrowed eyes flicked to valley. "Standard mapping." Rowena cocked hammer. Finch flinched. "Truth." Shore exhaled weariness. "We're marking vantage points for the water diversion dam Sinclair proposes." Beckett's grip tightened. "Dam?" Shore nodded. "Clamp at Northern Canyon mouth. Floodback would drown Cedar Hollow, redirect water to Rail Depot." Rowena's stomach iced. She had feared thirst. Instead came deluge. "Timeline?" Finch. Cleared throat. "Survey filed last week. Territorial engineer reviews tomorrow." Beckett exchanged bleak glance with Rowena. "Ride to Capitol again, with valley smoldering?" Rowena's mind raced. "Blueprints?" "In my saddlebag," Shore admitted. Cora and Saul appeared, weapons ready. Beckett bound Scout's wrists, confiscated maps. Roll of parchment bore Sinclair. Seal and engineer's pre-signature. Saul cursed. "We send word to Governor," Cora said. Rowena shook head. Political wheels turned slow. "We'll halt engineering crew." She traced ridgeline on map. Red X at canyon mouth where dam intended. Sinclair will mobilize heavy equipment within days. We sabotage staging ground before they pour first footing. Beckett studied her face. Dangerous. She lifted chin. "So's drowning." They hustled captives downhill, turned over to Deputy Marshal Squad, now posted at ranch under court order. Rowena, Beckett, and core team packed supplies for canyon sortie. Before departure, Rowena penned quick note. She found 10-year-old ranch girl Seti near bunkhouse, practicing lasso. Rowena knelt. "Ride this to Judge Jefferson's courier. It tells truth about dam." Sadie nodded solemnly, tucking letter into vest. They left Cedar Hollow mid-morning, following Canyon Trail north. Limestone walls soared, echoing hoofbeats. Sage bloomed purple along rivulets. Yet serenity felt like prelude to rifle crack. At noon, they paused beneath ledge overhang. Dust rose behind Cora's horse. Rowena glimpsed glint far back. Followers. Beckett handed spyglass. Rowena saw a pair of riders cloaked in tan dusters, maintaining distance. Scouts for Sinclair. Saul unshouldered Winchester. Beckett rested palm on barrel. "Let 'em trail. We feed them wrong path." He veered group into sandstone corridor. Branching west longer route, but shields from watchers. 4 hours later, they emerged into hidden Box Valley lush with juniper. There, among cottonwoods, clanged metallic echoes, hammers striking spikes, men shouting orders. The staging ground, Rowena peered through foliage. Dozens of laborers erected timber stockpiles, rail siding, and stone crib molds. Oxen hauled. Crates bearing Ulysses Foundry Logos Dam gate components. A temporary command shack flew Sinclair Pacific banner. Foreman oversaw, consulting clipboards. Cora whispered, "That's half a division." Saul counted wagons. At least 60 barrels of blasting powder. Beckett's eyes narrowed. "We used their powder against them." Rowena envisioned chain reaction. Crates detonating, equipment crippled, project delayed months. She scanned. Perimeter. Powder depot set near Ridge Talus, flanked by sentries. Plan formed. At dusk, Saul and ranch hands would sabotage ox harness lines. Chaos distracts. Cora sets brush fire at Eastern Supply Tent. Meanwhile, Rowena and Beckett infiltrate. Powder depot, rig fuses, escape before ignition. They waited till twilight. Crickets sang. Rowena's nerves vibrated like taut string. Beckett crouched beside her under cedar. "You sure?" She exhaled, tasting pine resin. "I once stole my life from flood and flame. I can steal a few barrels." He squeezed her forearm. "Watch your shadow." Night slid across valley. Lanterns flickered in camp. Workers retreated to mess tents. Oxen lowed as Saul's team quietly loosened yokes. Rowena and Beckett donned dark kerchiefs, crept toward powder cache. A lone guard smoked cigarillo, humming. Rowena threw pebble. Clink on separate crate drew. Guard away. Beckett rushed, silent chokehold. Guard collapsed, bound. Inside depot, barrels stacked floor to rafters. Rowena unraveled dynamite fuses, splicing with powder trails. She set central timer 15 minutes, enough to escape. Gorge. Beckett secured exit route by propping door with shovel. Fuse lit, they slipped into shadows. Suddenly whistle shrilled. Workers shouted, "Loose oxen!" Camp erupted in confusion earlier than expected. Lanterns swung, illuminating Rowena and Beckett halfway across clearing. "Stop!" Foreman leveled pistol. Shots rang. Rowena ducked behind a wheelbarrow. Beckett fired cover. They sprinted for trees as bullet nicked Rowena's calf. Pain seared, nearly toppling her. Beckett hauled her into brush. They rolled DOWNZA, OPE. In distance. Camp chased but hesitated near Powder Shed. A loud crack, then night blossomed white. Thunder rolled as crates exploded sequentially. Shockwave flattened juniper branches, dust geysered. Rowena felt ground shudder under spine. When deafening roar subsided, hillside glowed ember red. Shouts melted into panicked cries. Beckett tore cloth, bound Rowena's wound. Through ravine. He urged. They regrouped with Saul's crew at preset rendezvous west flank. Cora grinned breathlessly, clothes singed but eyes bright. Brushfire kept second shift busy. "Powder depot gone," Rowena said between gasps. Saul clasped her shoulder. U2 lit sky. They retreated under moon, choosing stream to mask tracks. Rowena's calf throbbed, but adrenaline carried feet. By dawn they reached abandoned hunter's cabin. Beckett cleaned wound, no bullet retained. Rowena rested. Against log wall, heavy fatigue clouding eyes. At camp, Beckett said softly, "I thought I'd lost you." She managed thin smile. "Not yet." He brushed knuckles across her cheek, hesitated, then leaned to kiss brow. Warmth spread from point of contact to fingertips. Rowena caught his hand, holding it until trembling stilled. Campfire crackled. Saul kept watch while others slept. Rowena closed eyes, listening to wind moan through chinked planks, feeling Beckett's heartbeat under fingers still intertwined with hers. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. She dreamt of water. Pouring through canyon unstoppable, only to find valley protected by invisible dam forged of courage and compassion. Waking, she knew dream must become truth. The real dam would rise if Sinclair regrouped. They needed legal kill shot, Rowena proposed. Ride to territorial capital with new evidence of sabotage exploded depot. Payroll ledgers perhaps salvaged. Governor would have to revoke permit. Beckett agreed, but supplies thin, Rowena injured, scouts trailing. They considered stealth through Indian Canyon where cavalry seldom patrolled. They broke camp midday. Clouds gathered, promising rain good. For cover, treacherous for cliffs. Rowena limped but refused wagon offer. By dusk they approached Raven's Gap. Narrow switchback through basalt pillars, rumored haunted. Cora recounted tale of Spanish friars murdered by Apaches, their cries echo nights. Rowena listened, half believing. When wind carried eerie wail, Gap's entrance choked with tumbleweed and fallen scree, passable only single file. Rowena's instincts pricked. She signaled halt. Beckett scanned ridge. Nothing. Yet a hush fell. Birdsong ceased. Arrow hissed. Thunking Saul's saddle. Ambush. Warriors in painted masks emerged on rock ledges. Dozen maybe. Not Apaches but hired bandits disguised to sow fear. Lead warrior brandished repeating rifle. Rowena, perched behind rocky spur, shouted, "We seek passage, not war." Answer, bullets spattering shale. Horse reared, screaming. Beckett yanked Rowena into alcove, shielding with body. She pushed him away, drawing Colt. Saul returned fire. Sparks danced. Cora flanked left, sniper rifle steady. One bandit toppled. Others retreated behind boulders. Rain broke, sheets slamming canyon. Gunsmoke turned vapor. Slick stones threatened footing. Rowena fired upward, forcing attacker duck. Beckett tossed her extra rounds. Bandits regrouped across ridge, lighting. Fused to dynamite bundle, aimed to collapse path. Rowena glimpsed spark amid downpour. Fuse sputtered but continued. She aimed, exhaled, squeezed. Bullet severed fuse inches before powder. Wet wick died. Bandit cursed to Saul unleashed volley. Cora echoed. Bandits faltered. One blew horn retreat. Signal. They melted into curtain of rain. Breathing ragged, Rowena scanned Team Meyer scratches. Gap now silent save patter. She retrieved severe dynamite. They'd adapt later. Storm persisted into night, masking travel. They camped under. Basalt overhang, posting guards. Rowena's wound reopened, bleeding through bandage. Beckett knelt, cleansing with boiled water. He met her gaze, voice rough. "I can't keep patching you." "You won't have to forever," she murmured, squeezing his wrist. "We finish this." They reached Capitol after 2 days' hard ride, arriving mud-splattered, eyes hollow. Governor Whitaker convened hearing in Rotunda. Reporters thronged. Rowena presented exploded depot photos, captured by Saul's Brownie camera. Payroll ledger recovered from bandit ambush, ironically listing payment to Nathaniel Shore for illegal dam reconnaissance. And her own sworn affidavit of sabotage. Sinclair's lawyers objected, but public outrage soared. Editorial cartoon. Already ran showing railroad octopus strangling family ranches. Governor revoked dam permit. Ordered investigation into Sinclair Pacific. Cheers filled Rotunda, yet victory rang hollow when telegram arrived. Sinclair sold controlling stake to Dominion Holdings, Shadow Corporation. New board vowed to pursue improved water initiatives. A Hydra's head severed only to Sprout 2. On return ride, Rowena contemplated cycle. How long until another Baron hunts our valley? Beckett steered horse alongside. As long as greed outweighs decency. But each time, we're stronger. He touched ring on her finger. Together. They reached Cedar Hollow, greeted by banners daubed "Welcome Home" and aroma of sage stew. In twilight's glow, ranch hands danced a fiddle. Children twirled. Sadi lassoed imaginary dragons. The valley breathed again, rivers glinting silver. Rowena. Stood on porch, wind-tangling hair, gazing across fields. Freedom tasted like rain-washed air, like gold ring warm on skin. Yet she sensed horizon rippling with new stories waiting, of settlers needing help, of laws begging reform, of hearts daring to weigh themselves against storms. She inhaled and smiled, because some scales, once balanced, never tilt so easily again. Dust lifted from the hooves of 200 cattle as Rowena Maddox pressed her mare across the rolling meadow east of Cedar Hollow, heart thrumming a rhythm matched only by the drumming sky overhead. Summer storm clouds hulked to the west purple, bruised and heavy with justice. She could smell the metallic tongue of oncoming rain, and with it, that old, flinty feeling of change. Beside her thundered Beckett Granger, lean and controlled in the saddle, eyes fixed on the break in the ridgeline. Ahead were smoke signals had burned for 3 days straight. Behind them rode Saul Mathers, Cora Delgado, and a string of ranch hands, no longer just workers, but soldiers of circumstance. Children of Cedar Hollow watched from the catwalk of the newly rebuilt barn, their cheers chasing the riders like prayer. The world had shifted. Abel Zeke Todd's defeat had stirred every predator with a score to settle or a deed to steal. Sinclair Pacific, land speculators, and the ghost of Civil War outfits seeking fortune in powder and fear. Each threat was another weight placed on Rowena's scales that had tipped so many times she wondered how the fulcrum hadn't cracked. They crested the ridge. Smoke wisped from a makeshift camp cupped in a shallow basin. A clutch of white survey tents, freshly sawn lumber, and glinting stacks of steel I-beams from Denver. Giant timber frames formed the skeleton of a trestle meant to funnel freight through the canyon where Cedar Hollow's water coursed. On a hillock above the camp, a flag fluttered, a black and silver emblem Rowena didn't recognize. Not Sinclair's. Colors, Beckett muttered, but funded by the same pockets. Saul lifted his field glass. Dominion Holdings, he read from a banner stitched along a wagon side. Never heard. Rowena's pulse skittered. Dominion Sinclair's shell. Company, new name, same clause, she said. We can't burn them out again. There are too many. Cora tightened her reins. Then we turn them in on themselves. How? Rowena asked. By making them choose between gold and gunfire. Cora replied, her gaze razor sharp. Beckett slid from his saddle and unrolled. Topo maps. Dominion needs this canyon to funnel freight and water in tandem. If we choke either path, engineers cannot proceed. Blow the new trestle, and they stall months. But we're short on powder after last raid. Rowena dismounted. Limping slightly, the wound on her calf still stiff. We steal their own, she murmured. By nightfall they lay belly down in tall grass above the Dominion camp. Lanterns bobbed below as workers ate at long tables. Rowena counted rifles 10 on perimeter, far fewer than she feared. Dominion. Underestimated. Better, 2 wagons were marked with powder icons, parked near the trestle frame. Rowena and Beckett would infiltrate. Saul and Cora would create a diversion by rustling cattle toward the camp's north fence line. Longhorns could appear like a wild stampede in darkness. After whispered good luck vows, Rowena slipped into shadow with Beckett. They skirted tents, using stacks of lumber for cover. Perfume of pitch pine mingled with fresh baked beans and coffee. Rowena's stomach knotted from hunger and nerves. She remembered the knot of rope around her wrists on auction day. How? Fear had tasted like rust then, same as now. At the powder wagons, 2 guards shared a flask. Beckett tossed pebble behind barrels. When guards turned, Rowena was on them hard, fast, Colt butt to temple. They collapsed without a sound. Beckett hoisted one into shadow. Rowena bound the other. They pried open wagon lid. Kegs of blasting powder gleamed. Beckett pulled dynamite fuses from satchel, laid them through central barrels. Rowena ran timing. Calculus in head. 15. Minutes to light and flee before Trestle toppled into Canyon. Then horns split the night. Sauls heard, charging the wire fence. Men shouted. Shots fired skyward. Chaos. Rowena lit fuse. Ember hissed along cord. She and Beckett sprinted across camp, weaving through panicked laborers. Lantern crashed, cloth tent ignited. They vaulted log pile and dashed for canyon lip path. Beckett glanced back. 5 minutes. Sudden pain burst across Rowena's shoulder, a bullet grazed flesh, spinning her. She fell. A Dominion foreman leveled pistol for kill shot. Beckett. Whirl fired. Foreman dropped. Rowena pressed hand to bleeding groove. Still breathing, she gritted. They pushed on. Behind them thunder erupted. Night exploded orange. Air slammed Rowena's ears. Treble cracks followed as trestle timbers snapped, cascading into canyon with roar like collapsing heaven. Shockwave flung dust and splinters. Horses screamed, Rowena. And Beckett dove behind boulder as debris rained. When silence settled, only the rush of the river and groans of injured men remained. From ridge, Saul's voice boomed. That's for our water. Cora whooped. Longhorns scattered into meadow, safe. Rowena's shoulder throbbed, but victory's heat eased pain. She and Beckett climbed ridge to join crew. On horizon, additional fires dotted Dominion camp supply tents ablaze. The corporation's investment charred to ash. Lightning cracked overhead. Storm clouds released rain, dousing flames but also washing prints and blood, a sky bred eraser. Rowena tilted face to drops, breathing gratitude. Beckett touched her ruined sleeve, worry etching his brow. We need Doc Green. I've survived worse, she said, though dizziness flirted with edges of vision. They returned to Cedar Hollow under dawn drizzle. Doc cleaned wound, stitched with deft fingers. No bullet, he pronounced, but rest. Rest was a luxury the valley could not afford. Telegrams arrived. Dominion petitioned Federal Circuit for armed militia to secure corporate property. A troop train would depart in 5 days bringing soldiers, lawyers, and a federal judge with authority to seize land for national rail imperative. Rowena paced infirmary porch. Rain drummed roof. We can't fight the federal army. Maybe. We don't have to, Beckett said, flipping through ledger of water allocations. The Homestead Act grants priority to settlers if proven they've cultivated land 5 consecutive years. He traced finger across pages. Many homesteads here, if we form a cooperative, water rights become part of community trust, protected by separate statute. Rowena saw dawn of plan. Dominion can seize ranches individually, but not a federally chartered agricultural district owned collectively. Saul scratched beard. Needs signatures from every landholder in Valley 300 at least, and file in Washington before. Troop train arrives. Then we ride, Cora declared. Over next 48 hours, Rowena and team fanned across valley. She rode to Widow Abernathy's apple orchards, to Father O'Reilly's mission farm, to mining hamlet of Cold Spring. She showed bruised shoulder, charred trestle photo, explained threat. Farmers signed. Miners signed. Even reformed gunmen guarding bunkhouses signed inking names over old sins. On the 3rd night, row upon row of lanterns lit Cedar Hollows. Barn now turned signing hall. Children carried inkpots. Old men traced shaky letters. Rowena helped a blind veteran mark X. The ledger swelled. At dawn, Beckett closed cover. 365. But one signature remained. Abel Zeke Todd. Though enemy, Todd still owned sliver of pasture seized before river fight. Without it, the cooperative lacked contiguous boundary. Rowena's stomach churned. We need him. Prison wagon left yesterday, taking him to Carson Jail, Saul said. We can't reach him. Rowena's gaze found Beckett's. Resolve clicked. Then we board the troop train. Disguised as Bureau of Land Clerks, Rowena and Beckett reached Lobo Junction, last station before Capitol, just as troop train. Whistled arrival. Steel behemoth hissed. Carriages painted federal blue. Soldiers milled on platform, but at rear car stood prisoner cage wagon. Deputy marshal inside. Todd sat shackled, sling now gone. His eyes widened at Rowena's approach in spectacles and pinned hair. She drew a document. Property acquisition statement, she said coolly. Sign here to relinquish claim and reduce sentence. Todd sneered. Why should I? Beckett stepped forward, flashing marshal badge borrowed from friendly deputy in Coldwater. Because refusing voids parole. Holds you here to testify in federal sabotage case. 20 years. Rowena leaned close, voice silk sharp. Sign and you travel to Carson tonight, free in 6 months for good behavior. Coin returned. Todd scanned faces, soldiers impatient, train conductor checking watch. Growling, he seized pen and scrawled signature. Rowena thanked him with curt nod, then boarded passenger car as whistle shrieked. She and Beckett jumped off far-end platform before train gained speed. Clutching final signature, they wired cooperative ledger to Washington via priority dispatch. 3 days later, federal recorder approved charter. Cedar Hollow Agricultural Trust. Dominion's land claims frozen pending Supreme Court review. Armored troop train arrived to serve seizure writ, but legal courier presented trust certificate first. Judge reviewed, frowned, withdrew order. Soldiers stood down, celebrations erupted, fiddles played. Rowena danced with Cora, laughter shaking rafters. Beckett watched, eyes soft. When music slowed, he approached, offering hand. She accepted. They moved across packed earth floor, steps sync with hearts. Later, on porch beneath stars, Rowena traced scar on his brow. We built something larger than any one ranch, he cupped her cheek. Because you refused to be weighed. She smiled, tears shining. Stay, she whispered, the same word he had once asked of her. He kissed her gentle, certain answering without speaking. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. Rain returned, not as drought-breaker but blessing. Water-filled ditches, spinning mill wheel that Widow Abernathy's grandchildren had rebuilt. Cooperative Council met monthly in schoolhouse. Rowena elected chair. She negotiated fair grazing rotations, grain requisitions, and river cleanup. Dominion sent lawyers thrice, but each time faced Unified Valley and withdrew. On Harvest Moon, Rowena stood atop newly raised pedestrian bridge timbers, etched with names of every signer watching children toss wildflowers into river where Todd's rope had once swung. Beckett stepped beside her, fingers weaving through hers. Cedar Hollow's stronger, he said. Because we share the weight, she replied. Wind carried scent of apple pie and wood smoke. Lanterns across valley winked like distant constellations, a galaxy of resilience. Rowena lifted her face to sky. Scars remained, storms would come. But the scales within her were balanced at last, not by gold or flour, but by lives intertwined. And she once bought for her weight, now measured worth in stories told and futures forged. A currency no man could trade. Middle of part 5. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. Rowena Maddox awoke before dawn to the hush that precedes battle. A silence so taut it seemed the valley itself held its breath. The faint perfume of rain lingered from the night's brief shower, but already the eastern sky bruised with storm clouds, the color of tempered steel. She rolled from her pallet in Cedar Hollow's main house study, still too restless to claim Beckett's adjacent bed as her own, and splashed well water onto her face. The reflection in the wash pan showed eyes, sharp with frayed sleep, and a healing welt across her shoulder where a mercenary's bullet had grazed. She buttoned a fresh blouse, slid the coat low on her hip, and stepped into the waking hush. Beyond the veranda, lanterns winked to life in the bunkhouse. Silhouettes bustled, filling water barrels and checking rifle stocks. A murmur drifted from the corrals where Saul Mathers directed hands hitching a supply wagon. Rowena nodded to him and crossed the yard toward the granary where Beckett Granger mapped strategy by lamplight. He looked up as she entered, pale eyes glinting beneath hat brim. The lamplight threw the scar above his brow into stark relief. On the table lay Dominion Holdings' latest survey diagrams, telegraphed overnight from an ally in Carson City. Their new plan bypassed the destroyed trestle, a series of siphons designed to divert Cedar Hollow's water upstream, using steel conduits buried through the mesa wall. Minimal construction, maximum theft. They've purchased 36 Whitworth rifled cannon, Beckett said without preamble, tapping a manifest. Equipment escort, due through Devil's Hall pass at moonrise. Rowena exhaled a frost-thin breath despite July heat. They'll hold the canyon with artillery before we can petition another injunction. Exactly. He slid a finger along the map to a red-inked gulch overlooking the pass. But those guns haven't crossed county lines yet. They'll overnight at the bottleneck while the engineers reconnoiter. Rowena traced the gulch, steep walls, a narrow shelf road, and only one watering stop, a box. Elder Spring fed by seep from the mesa. Ambush terrain. Textbook, Beckett confirmed. We collapse the shelf. The cannon roll into the ravine. Dominion loses its teeth. Rowena's pulse drummed. She glanced at dynamite crates stacked in the corner, relics of the mine that once scarred the far ridge. We'll need every stick. Beckett's mouth twitched into a fraction of a smile. And the element of surprise. By noon, 8 riders and a wagon laden with explosives threaded the sycamore stand south of Long Shadow Mesa. Cora led the vanguard, Winchester across her saddle horn. Her freckles had darkened under relentless sun, but the fire in her gaze burned hotter. Saul handled the reins of the dynamite wagon with the care of a surgeon guiding scalpel to heart. 2 younger hands, Elias and Jonah, rode flank, their knuckles white around Army surplus carbines. Rowena brought up the rear with Beckett, scanning the foothills for Dominion scouts. They reached Devil's Hall by late afternoon, the sun a hammered coin suspended over the canyon mouth. The pass yawned like a monstrous jaw, 40 feet of shelf. Road cut into rotten limestone, the drop on the south side plummeting 300 feet to a boulder-strewn wash. Centuries of freeze-thaw had left hairline fractures across the ledge. A well-placed charge could shear the whole shelf like cheese. They made camp in a notch above, hidden by knotted juniper. Rowena unloaded Dynamite 10 crates, each stick wired with 6-second fuse. Saul showed Jonah how to splice lengths together for a 30-foot simultaneous burn. Beckett hammered iron pitons into fissures along the rock face, threading fuse lines until the canyon wall became a silent instrument poised to sing. While the others worked, Rowena belly crawled along a goat trail overlooking the valley mouth. Far below, heat shimmered off desert flats, but even through the mirage she saw dust plumes on the horizon. The convoy she sighted her spyglass. A column of 40 laborers marched beside 6 flatbed wagons draped in tarpaulin. 8 troopers dressed in Dominion's private security black rode before them, rifles slung. A separate coach carried a portly engineer, consulting a journal likely marking water table charts. 2 advanced scouts on Mustangs flagged hazards. But none looked skyward where Rowena lay. They'll reach the shelf at dusk, she reported after crawling back. Camp there for water, Beckett nodded. We wait until they unyoke. Less chance of livestock outrunning blast. Night slid across the sky. Crickets began their cadence. Somewhere a coyote sang. Rowena checked each crate a final time, palms dirty with nitro dust. She wondered if fear ever dulled. Each heartbeat felt like a ticking detonator dot as stars blinked awake. Lanterns flickered below. Dominion's convoy had halted at the spring. Ox bellows floated upward. Troopers posted watch fires at either end of the shelf. Rowena's jaw clenched. We would have to get closer. She and Beckett descended the goat trail, dynamite slung in canvas bags. They hugged the cliff, moving in, creeping shadow until they crouched behind a cedar stump no more than 50 feet from the nearest wagon. A trooper's silhouette cut against firelight, cigarette ember glowing red. Each exhale punctured the dark like Morse code. Rowena's pulse hammered. She reached into the sack, withdrew 2 sticks, and mouthed a countdown. Beckett nodded, pressed fuse into brass igniter. At 0 they leapt from cover. Rowena vaulted onto the shelf road. The trooper's cigarette froze mid-arc as he inhaled. Rowena chopped his wrist, sending the rifle clattering. Beckett pistol, whipped the second guard. In 3 breathless heartbeats, they'd trussed both men with rope and gagged them behind. An ox wagon, working fast, they wedged dynamite into pre-planted drill holes along shelf's outer edge. Sweat slicked Rowena's temples. Her wounded shoulder throbbed. Each thump of hooves or rattle of a yoke ring seemed to trumpet their presence. But the camp bustled with meal chatter. Once the last charge was set, Beckett unspooled the master fuse up the slope to their hideout. They retreated in silence and reached the ridge where Saul waited. Rope taut around the wagon braked above the shelf. The plan, at detonation, Saul's team would push the wagon loaded with extra crates over the brink, magnifying the blast. Rowena breathed deep. She held Beckett's gaze in the lamplight. Emotions roiled: apprehension, conviction, a tendril of hope. She raised the striker. To the fuse. A gunshot cracked sharp, startling. Rowena jerked, fuse sparking prematurely. Below, in the camp, chaos erupted. A trooper had discovered the missing sentries and fired into air. Shouts, saboteurs. Lanterns swung, illuminating cliff kin. Beckett seized the fuse line, sprinting upslope as Spark raced downhill. He slashed. A fresh segment, dousing ember with gloved fingers before it reached charge. Pain flashed in his eyes, burned. But he signaled success. Elias and Jonah opened covering fire as troopers scrambled for rifles. Bullets whined off limestone. Rowena ducked, dragged crates into position near edge. Push! Saul hollered. Together they heaved. The wagon wheels screeched over limestone lip, teetered, then plunged. Horses below screamed. Men scattered. Beckett lit the master fuse. Sparks hissed, chasing along rope into darkness. Rowena's lungs seized. She grabbed Beckett's arm, and they sprinted uphill. 10 seconds, she counted every heaving stride. The night lit electric. Sound vanished in the first flash, then rushed back as a concussive roar. The ledge disappeared, sucked into the canyon. Wagons, cannon frames, oxen all pitched into void, accompanied by a howl of twisting steel. Fireballs belched skyward like dragons. A breeze slapped Rowena's face with dust and the sulfur stench of victory. But as the echoes faded, a second cry rose. Elias, pinned beneath a fallen branch from the blast shock. Rowena scrambled, shoulders igniting with pain, and with Cora's help rolled beam aside. Elias groaned but lived. Below, Dominion's camp was rubble. Survivors staggered amid collapsing fires, some begging for help. Rowena's gut twisted. They were enemies, yet human. She felt Beckett's hand on her shoulder, understanding, but letting her choose. She whistled across canyon. A white cloth rose, signaling ceasefire. Medical aid would be given. The weight of mercy returned heavier than lead. By dawn, Cedar Hollow's riders guided Dominion wounded to railway infirmary under truce. Federal marshals arrived, alarmed by sabotage, but more shocked by Dominion's unlicensed artillery. Arrests were made. The corporate charter suspended under the new trust petition. Rowena found a quiet patch near the old bridge site. River sang below, swollen by summer melt. She sat on a stump, watching water swirl where Todd's rope had snapped months earlier. The valley felt different, a chapter closing. Footsteps thudded behind. Beckett joined, handing a tin mug of chicory. He waited until she sipped, then said, "Dominion withdrew. The governor's issued order protecting trust lands, and troops will escort engineers out of territory." Rowena closed eyes, tension bleeding. "It never ends, does it?" "Maybe not," he admitted. He knelt, drawing something from pocket, a slender wooden box carved with simple scrollwork. Rowena's heart kicked. "I had Saul send for this," he said, opening the lid to reveal his mother's wedding band and a second ring ruff forged from Cedar Hollow Creek gold, its facets hammered but aglow in sunlight. "We've measured everything by scales and debts." His voice trembled. "How about we measure by promises instead?" Rowena's throat closed. Wind rustled cottonwood leaves, whispering yes before she could. She met his eyes clear, steady. Reflecting sky. Hope flared. She extended her wounded hand, the scar tracing memory of battle. He slid the hammered ring onto her finger, fitting perfectly beside Lydia Granger's. Tears blurred her vision, but did not fall. He rose, pulling her with him. From barnyard came whoops as children discovered fledgling pups. Saul's laughter boomed. Cora's fiddle floated on breeze. Life insisted on its own continuation. A distant telegraph click clacked from station, no doubt new trouble brewing. Rowena and Beckett turned toward Valley, shoulders touching. "Tomorrow?" he asked. "We ride it together," she replied. And so they did into fields rippling with grain yet unthreshed, under skies bruised but brightening two souls once. Wade, now free. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The pre-dawn sky over Cedar Hollow pulsed with a strange, electric mauve, too early for sunrise, too late for the midnight indigo Rowena Maddox had learned to trust. It was the color of thresholds, a liminal hush that sneaks between nights. Last heartbeat and day's first inhale. Beneath that uncanny glow, Rowena lay awake on the farmhouse porch swing, boots propped on the rail, Colt balanced across thighs. She listened to the valley breathe, the soft gnaw of cattle, a lone owl complaining from the cottonwoods, the distant cleave of water against sandstone as the river pressed its eternal argument. She should have been exhausted. For 3 weeks, she had slept in punctured naps, sometimes on a barn loft with the smell of horses in her hair, sometimes on a bare timber ledge overlooking the South Ridge where Dominion had staged its final humiliation. But now, even with the valley quiet, rest refused her. The peace felt too thin, stretched like rawhide cured in shade. Any moment, it might tear and reveal a fresh wound beneath. Bootsteps creaked behind her. Beckett Granger emerged from the doorway, hair mussed, shirt half buttoned. Moonlight carved silver contours along his jaw. He carried 2 tin mugs, passing one to Rowena. "Coffee's a miracle," she said after a sip, black scalding. "So are you," he answered softly, and sat beside her. They watched the ridge lighten. 3 more claims filed against the trust this week, Rowena said. "If each challenge spawns 2 more, we'll be swamped by summer." Beckett nudged the porch rail with his boot. "We weathered sabotage, shell companies, and a private Army's cannon. Paper battles are easier. Paper cuts deeper sometimes." She rotated her shoulder. The bullet grazed now a puckered star. "But the people behind that paper Dominion's board don't know when to quit." Beckett reached into his pocket and unfolded the latest telegram. Governor Whitaker's crest at the top, the ink smudged from speed. Rowena read aloud. Dominion petition advanced to federal circuit. Temporary injunction on trust lands suspended until special hearing at Fort Bridger Courthouse 14 days hence. 14 days. If the injunction passed, Cedar Hollow's cooperative charter would freeze. All agriculture, water, and grazing decisions would revert to federal overseers sympathetic to Dominion's coffers. The trust would suffocate. "We ride to Fort Bridger," Rowena said. Voice calm. Beckett nodded. "Plead our case." "And if they weigh gold heavier than law?" His eyes held hers. Then we remind them the West still balances itself. Preparations. Consumed a day. Saddlebags stuffed with deed records. Photographic plates of Dominion sabotage. Cora's meticulously kept ledgers. Saul organized ranch hands into patrol shifts. Any raiders appearing while Rowena and Beckett were away would meet a valley prepared. By twilight they mounted Rowena on the nimble roan. Beckett atop his Appaloosa accompanied by Cora, Saul, Elias, and Jonah. Green thrust a vial of laudanum at Rowena for the shoulder ache. She tucked it into her satchel beside sealed affidavits from 36 settlers. Children clustered near the gate. Sadie, hair in twin braids, handed Rowena a pouch of riverstones painted with good luck symbols. Swirls, stars, a rough depiction of Rowena's colt. Rowena knelt, pressing the pouch to her heart, then kissed the girl's forehead. "Watch the sky," Rowena whispered. "If clouds roll wrong, you dig channels to the east orchard." Sadie saluted, serious beyond her 10 years, with a chorus of farewells blending into fiddle music from the bunkhouse. The riders trotted west. The route to Fort Bridger crossed 120 miles of broken plateau and 2 mountain passes. At midday of the second day, a dust storm slammed down, slicing visibility to arm's length. They huddled in a rock alcove while grit peppered their gear and flayed their lips raw. Rowena thought of the first time she'd tasted dust auction day, when fear coated her throat the same way in the hiss of sand. Beckett pressed his forehead to hers. "We are not what they weigh us as," he said, quoting words she had spoken once. The storm howled. They waited. By evening the sky cleared. They made camp near a dry arroyo. Rowena couldn't sleep, so she polished her revolver beneath the starlight and rehearsed courtroom testimonies in her mind. Oppressor, ledger, trust, hope. She spoke them into her cupped palms, then let the wind steal them toward the constellations. The next dawn, they spotted the long, low roofs of Fort Bridger, a hub of cavalry, freight hawkers, and politicians sniffing new manifest destinies. Canvas tents spoked around the stone courthouse like fungus on granite. Dominion banners snapped from 3 pavilions, Silver Eagle, Black Field of Flag. Rowena had come to loathe. Marshal Dupree met them at the gate. He eyed Rowena's Colt, Beckett's repeating rifle. "No firearms inside," he barked. Rowena surrendered her weapon reluctantly. Beckett did the same. Cora smirked. She had a knife in every boot whose existence no marshal would detect. Saul showed empty hands but carried dynamite fuse disguised as rope on his belt. Justice Hall's interior smelled of sealed wood and busy ink. Oil lamps illuminated rows of benches filled with ranchers, miners, and Dominion shareholders. At the front waited 3 circuit judges, 1 stern woman with steel gray bun, 1 balding man with watery eyes, and a hawk-nosed elder whose expression promised no mercy. Dominion's counsel rose first. Matthias Crowell, a silk waistcoated shark with rings on every finger, presented Dominion's petition. Cedar Hollow water was federal resource. Private trust hindered national commerce. Sabotage by Rowena and associates warranted revoking the trust and seizing assets. He called Abel Zeke Todd as witness. Todd limped to stand. Fresh suit, new sling. Rowena's gut twisted. Todd testified that Rowena was violent, manipulative, and property until stolen by Granger's gun. He painted a tale of drunken grief, of business investment ruined, and of Rowena leading raiders who burned wagons full of humanitarian supplies. Crowell presented charred fragments of Dominion crates as evidence, twisting context like a hangman's knot. Rowena's turn came. She stepped forward, shoulder aching under linen blouse, but voice steady. She laid out the timeline. The sale by weight. The rescue. Todd's assaults. Dominion's illegal damming. Artillery shipments. The sabotage after repeated state petitions ignored. She cited homestead charters, water law precedents, and Governor Whitaker's own statements. She produced photographic plates, Dominion workers planting explosives near Cedar Hollow Ditch. Ledger entries paying mercenaries. Each plate flashed on screen in gaslight glow. Crowd murmured. Judges whispered among themselves. Todd's face paled. Crowell objected. Plates fabricated. Saul rose, holding original glass negatives in gloved hands, and the camera used serial registered to Elias Weaver months earlier. Courthouse archivist confirmed authenticity. Then Cora stepped up. Translator for a Ute elder named Vovoka Ironcloud, who had traveled with them. Ironcloud testified that Dominion had bribed local gangs to disguise attacks as tribal raids, inciting prejudice. His calm, deep voice receded hush over the hall. Rowena's closing words cut through the silence. Justice is not measured by weight on a scale of gold. It is measured by the lives we protect when we choose humanity over profit. Cedar Hollow's hands are stained with earth and harvest, not greed. Judge Hawthorne, the hawk-nosed one, leaned forward. Miss Maddox, you admit to detonating a private munitions convoy? Rowena met his gaze. I admit to defending a community when the law fell silent. I call it self-preservation. Gasps rippled. Beckett's jaw tensed. Rowena felt an echo of chains weighing her wrists, but forced shoulders squared. Court recessed. Deliberation would take hours. Beckett, Rowena, and team waited in a horseshoe of cottonwoods behind the hall. Rowena's palms sweat cold. Her breath rasped. If they side with Dominion, she said low, they'll arrest us before we reach our horses. Beckett tucked hair behind her ear. Then we'll run again, find new valleys. But Cedar Hollow is home. Her voice cracked. Beckett pulled her close. Footsteps approached. Marshal Dupree coughed. Court reconvenes. Inside, the gallery was packed wall to wall. Judge Fields read verdict. Charges of sabotage dismissed due to Dominion's unlicensed artillery. Cheers burst from Cedar Hollow supporters. Rowena's knees nearly buckled. Then Judge Hawthorne spoke. However, trust legality remains in question. He lifted an envelope stamped with federal seal. A new petition filed this morning by Senator Paxton demands all river water rights be transferred to national reservoir planning. Shock quieted crowd. Rowena's pulse spiked. She looked at Dominion Council. They smirked. A new end run. Judge Steele, the stern woman, scowled. Senator's petition lacks environmental study and fails to name an implementation bureau. Premature, Hawthorne sighed. Watery-eyed Fields shrugged. Steele continued. Therefore, the petition is dismissed. Crowd erupted. Cedar Hollow ranchers cheered. Miners pounded benches. Dominion's Crowell smacked his briefcase, glaring. Judge Steele wasn't done. She stood. Furthermore, this court issues a permanent injunction prohibiting Dominion or any successor corporation from diverting Cedar Hollow's water without unanimous consent of the Agricultural Trust. Gavels banged. Rowena exhaled, tears sprouting. Cora hugged her fiercely, freckles shining with joy. Saul whooped. Todd slumped in his seat. Outside, sunlight spilled, crisp and clear. Rowena retrieved her Colt from Marshall's station weapon of defense, now felt heavier with a burden lifted. She strapped it on, but Beckett lay his hand over hers. Maybe we can holster peace a while. She smiled. Maybe. They rode home under sunset ribbons, trust papers secure in Beckett's saddlebag. At Cedar Hollow, bonfires lit the yard. Fiddle and harmonica weaving laughter. Rowena's mare trotted beneath rope-light arch, reading Hitched on Hope. She blinked, then laughed as Cora tossed her a wreath of prairie flowers. Beckett dismounted, knelt, pulled hammered gold ring from his pocket. Rowena's heart soared. Under glimmer of lanterns and the hush of cattle beyond fences, they spoke vows, to weigh each day by kindness, to guard water and hope, to stitch scars into stronger skin. The valley roared approval. Green pronounced them husband and wife. Children showered them with painted river stones Sadie had gathered. Rowena raised her ring-lit hand. "This land is ours because we are each other's," she called, voice carrying to the ridges. "We sold neither hope nor worth for coin, and never will." Thunder rolled not from storm, but from hooves. In the distance, riders carried lanterns, settlers from neighboring valleys arriving to share harvest seeds. Rowena smiled, community growing, boundaries falling. Cedar Hollow no longer fragile. She turned to Beckett. "Where trouble rides in with the wind," he finished, "we'll ride back stronger." They kissed beneath stars. 2 days later, Rowena and Beckett stood on New Bridge over the river. Children's names carved into planks. Flour sacks, repurposed as canvas bunting. Water below sparkled free. Rowena dropped Todd's auction ledger, now void, into the current. Pages soaked, then floated downstream, currency dissolved. Beckett slid an arm around her waist. "Ready to finally rest?" he asked. She leaned into him. "Rest, yes, but never stop watching the horizon. Together." And so they did, keeping vigil where legend meets every day, balancing mercy and iron, measuring worth by the lives beside them. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.